Once again, a hero from the past returns to protect the future in Avengers Twilight #1. So this story is about an aged Captain America who returns to action to inspire and protect a world that has more or less lost its way. We've seen the old superhero comes back story done numerous times at a high level over the past few decades. We've had Old Man Batman, we've had Old Man Superman, we've had Old Man Wolverine, etc. What we have here with Avengers Twilight is basically an Old Man Captain America story. And what I came into this issue looking for was an answer to the question of how is this story different from all those other hero comes back stories? What does this story bring to the table that those didn't? The answer, I think, lies in how this story portrays certain American freedoms being assaulted, and how certain truths are being twisted to suit a fascistic agenda. I'm not completely sold on this book yet, but I'm intrigued and curious enough to keep going. Regardless, I'll definitely come back for issue 2 to see what Daniel Acuna turns in on the art and colors. What this guy turned in here is masterful. And of course, an Alex Ross cover is an Alex Ross cover. I mean, it's pure beauty. It's almost like, what else can you say at this point? I think I'm starting to understand what it's like to be an older person that's disenfranchised with what the younger people are doing. Case in point, I was on Threads this morning, and I came across this post by this innocent cosplayer chick who asked the question, which is the better movie, the original Star Wars film or Rogue One? And I had to physically restrain myself from going off on this kid. Don't even ask me about Rogue One. Like, people get mad at me when I talk about that movie and just how I hated it. It's Captain America's Kingdom Come in Avengers Twilight #2. So we're still with this older version of Captain America in this issue. I think he's supposed to be in his 70s or his 80s. He's taken the super soldier serum once again, and he's teaming with a group of young freedom fighters who are trying to wake the world up to the fascistic crimes that are being committed right in front of their faces. At this early juncture, it's pretty easy to compare Avengers Twilight to the classic DC Comics story Kingdom Come, where Superman and the Justice League come out of retirement to basically show the new generation how it's done. There are comparisons to be made, I'll grant you that. Specifically, for me at least, the fact that this is clearly a Captain America story, despite it being called Avengers Twilight. Similarly, Kingdom Come was obviously about Superman as opposed to the entire Justice League. But there's a poignancy and a relevancy to the storytelling in Avengers Twilight that I would argue Kingdom Come did not have. Specifically, all this stuff about America kind of turning into an oppressive, fascist regime. So I don't know that it's necessarily fair to call Avengers Twilight a Kingdom Come ripoff, so to speak. And how ironic that Alex Ross, who famously drew and painted Kingdom Come, is our cover artist for Avengers Twilight. Daniel Acuna, who is our artist and our colorist here, continues to hit it out of the park. His work is not only very colorful and interesting to look at, but it has a certain grit to it that's very appropriate for this kind of Captain America story. On the subject of this older version of Captain America, I'd be curious to know if Acuna is basing his appearance on anybody in particular. To me, he kind of looks like Clint Eastwood with Stan Lee's hair. It's not a bad thing, I guess. So last issue we saw that old man Steve Rogers had to take the super soldier serum again to once again become Captain America. I'm sure this has been addressed in another story at some point, but is that how the super soldier serum works? Does Cap have to retake it periodically to stay superpowered? And if so, how often? Is it every 10 years? Is it every 20 years? How does that work? When I talked about issue 1, I said that I wasn't sold yet on this Avengers Twilight story. As of this issue, I'm officially sold. Count me in. At least for the foreseeable future. Captain America has to break Iron Man out of prison in Avengers Twilight number 3. Yeah, that's our premise for this issue. Old man Tony Stark has to break into a supervillain prison / evil research facility to break out Old Man Tony Stark. Or at least Old Man Tony Stark's head? Perhaps his head and torso? It's not entirely clear how much is physically left of Old Man Tony Stark based on what we see in this issue. All Alex Ross covers are cool, or at least most of them are, but this one especially so because it's of Ms. Marvel, and Alex Ross doesn't get to work on Ms. Marvel that often, although he has worked on her before. So there's a novelty to this cover that wouldn't necessarily be there otherwise. There's also a Ms. Marvel variant cover by Sarah Pichelli that is clearly an homage to The Dark Knight Returns. Which is fitting because, as we've mentioned before, Avengers Twilight is not necessarily unlike The Dark Knight Returns. Despite the presence of Ms. Marvel and various other Avengers characters, this is still clearly a Captain America story. And to me, one of the big questions going forward is, are they going to kill off Captain America at the end? They don't have to, but you know what? I'd be okay with it. If you've ever wondered what Thor would sound like as a traffic cop, then there's a moment in Avengers Twilight number 4 that's just for you. There's a moment in this issue where Thor lands on top of a fighter jet and tells the pilot, "Please exit thy vehicle." I like that, it's a funny line. Thankfully, this issue does tell us where Thor has been since America has descended into fascism. And I don't love the explanation that we get, but I accept it, I guess. How long is this book supposed to go, in terms of the number of issues? I ask that not because I'm tired of it, but because it's making me want more. For some reason I had it in my head that it was going to go 5 issues, but I don't know, the way issue 4 feels, it seems like they're just now getting into the 3rd act, so it seems like they could easily go 6 at least. One of the reasons this book is a Captain America story more than it's an Avengers story in the grand scheme of things is because it feels like the soul and the spirit of America are hanging in the balance here. It feels like our freedoms and our liberties as a country and as a society are on the line. It feels like our author Chip Zdarsky is aiming pretty close to home in terms of how poignant and relevant certain things in this story seem as it relates to the real world, particularly as we enter this next election cycle. For instance, our bad guys, our administration, our upholders of the fascistic status quo in this story are trying to maintain their dominance by instilling a culture of ignorance in the world. And at one point in this issue, we have a line about how the Avengers are trying to take their country away from them. Sounds kind of familiar. I'm just saying.